Hi there, Chevrolet owners. Today in your 2016 Chevrolet Equinox, we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install Curt's base plate. And this is what our base plate looks like when it's installed. You've got your attachment points here on each side, and these will attach to any Curt tow bar and also Blue Ox tow bars. We do also have adapters available here at etrailer, so if you have a Roadmaster or another manufacturer's base plate or tow bar, you can adapt those over so that way you can get it attached to this base plate. If we go just to the inside of that, we've got our safety chain attachment here. We can hook those on each side, so we've got that supplemental connection. And the rest of the base plate's hidden completely behind the fascia there, so you're really not going to see the rest. The attachment arms here can be removed, so when you're not flat towing, you simply pull the pin here and give it a twist, and that'll pop out of there. That'll minimize the base plate look at the front of the vehicle. And I also like that it kind of stays flush here at the front, because when you're walking by in your garage, there's the chance that you could hit your shin on there, and boy, that really hurts. So it's cool that you can kind of clean it up a little bit at the front. Now, some of the things that I didn't particularly like about this base plate was the fact that it did not have any electrical mounting on it. So we had to make our own bracketry here to get this installed, and our customer doesn't have a braking system, but if they did, they would also be installing a breakaway switch, and there's no location on here provided for that either. So the other manufacturers like Blue Ox would provide mounting locations for at least your electrical connector, and usually that's enough to where you can kind of utilize that mounting location to get your breakaway switch attached somewhere right there. So this was quite a bit more work. You got to spend a little extra money on some either stock metal, or we're using long brackets here to make this all happen. So I just didn't really particularly care about that. I did run into a couple of issues too on the install. The hardware just didn't seem to fit as well as some of the other manufacturers' base plates, but in the end it did actually look pretty nice, so I was happy with the results in the end. But yeah, just compared to the other manufacturers, I did find this one to be quite a bit more difficult to install. There was some extra components that was required to make it all happen. I really would recommend a Roadmaster base plate. They're going to be quite a bit easier. But the Blue Ox one is very similar to this base plate. It's going to look very similar, but it's also going to be, in my opinion, a better kit. It just provides better hardware in it that just kind of attaches a little bit better, and you get that mounting location in there as well. But if Curt is something that you're kind of brand loyal to and you want to stick with, this is an option we've got here at etrailer, so you can pick this up. So now that we've covered some of the features of our base plate, why don't you follow along with me and we'll show you how to get it installed. This is going to be a pretty lengthy project, so if you're doing this at home in your garage, I would give yourself at least a full Saturday, maybe even a full weekend to get it on, just because of some of the issues you'll see that we ran into with the hardware. Might give you a hiccup that might make it extend another day. We'll begin our installation at the front of the vehicle with our hood open. There's 4 Torx bits across the front that we're going to need to remove. So we'll use a T20 Torx bit to remove these bolts. And we can see here that our side covers are kind of covering us up here, so we'll be taking those off as well. So we're gonna use a screwdriver here to remove these push pins. You can see there's a little kind of like a slotted opening there for your screwdriver to fit in. Push that in there and get a little bit of a twist. You can also use a trim panel tool as well, because they do get a little stiff, but usually once you pop the center out, you can just pull it the rest of the way out of there. Just like that. We're going to get all 3 of these clips removed on each side. After removing all 3 clips, you can lift up on the front of the panel here, and it just flips backwards. It stays attached right there on that side. We'll get the other side removed the same way. We're now on the driver's side wheel well area, and I did turn the wheel a little bit to the right here just to give us some room to access the hardware here. You got 2 bolts, same size Torx as up front, the T20. 2 clips, same as the ones up front, and then straight up here you'll have a 7mm head bolt. So we'll use our 7mm socket to remove that. So we're just going to zip these guys out of here. Get our Torx out first. Get that 7mm out of there. And we'll use our screwdriver to pop those clips out, just like the ones up top. We'll then do the same thing over on the other side. When I go to do the other side, I'm going to turn the wheel the other way. We're now underneath the vehicle, and along the front edge here on the outsides, you're going to have a couple of bolts there. We're going to use that 7mm socket once again to remove these. Head over to the other side and grab the other two out. And at this point now, I'm going to go ahead and pull those off just because there's like a little hook clip there. It probably won't interfere with you pulling the fascia off. It'll probably slide right out of there, but we're right here. Might as well pull that out to make sure we don't get caught up on that. Now, before we go to peel the fascia off though, to make things a little easier on ourselves, if we peel back the fender liner just a little bit here, we can see we got some electrical connectors here for the fog lights, so we can go ahead and remove these. There's a lock tab on this upper one, so you have to push back on the lock tab first. And it's pretty stiff, so it looks like we're going to need a screwdriver to, oh, there it goes. So that just pulls out of there, and then you can press on the release button and pull it out. There's the release button there, and your lock tab here just slides in behind it. This is actually still in the release position there. It does pull all the way out, but if you just get it back, it is unlocked. Our other one here, I actually find it easier if we just give this a little twist. In those cases, we can twist this and pull it out of here. Oh, what looks like we're going to actually hit on a piece of plastic there, so we cannot do that while the connector is connected. So we're then going to press it on the release tab and pull straight down. These tend to build up quite a bit of dirt and debris, so we're kind of jiggling it a little bit there to get some of that dirt and debris out of there so we can pull out of there so it's not so difficult. We'll go over to the other side now and disconnect the fog light connectors on that side as well. To remove your fascia, we're going to come in here at the corner where the front fascia meets our fender there. Kind of peel back on the liner just a bit there to get our hand behind it. And we're just going to be pulling outward to get this released. Just like that. And we're only going to go to about this point here. And what I actually like to do is take one of the screws that we had removed here and just put it in there just a couple of turns. That way it'll hold this side up. If you've got an extra set of hands, one person can be holding the one side while you're doing the other. But if you're trying to do this all by yourself at home, and it is possible to do it all by yourself, you'll want to just stick one of these guys up in here, or maybe on this outer one here. Either one is fine, just to have a little something to keep this up while we are releasing the other side. And that's really all we need, just a little something like that. So we'll head over to the other side. We'll release this the same way. Make sure we get that pop out of there, working our way towards the front. I'm using my body here too to kind of keep it pressed in enough to make sure it's not going to come off of there. We'll then get ourselves at the center, remove that bolt that we had temporarily stuck in there, and then we're just going to walk it away, being careful to double check we don't have any connectors. We already got them all, it looks like, so we're good to go. And we'll set this aside where it won't get damaged. On our passenger side, we're going to remove the air box here. There's a nut here, and there's one kind of tucked in this opening right back here. So we're going to remove this harder to get to one first. Just zip that nut off of there. Looks like it's made onto the air box, so it's not going to come off completely. Well, this one came off. The other one's stuck onto there. It's probably just a little bit of the squish rubber holding the nut to it. So we'll just slide that off of there, and then it's hooked into your air box up there where your air filter goes, so we're just kind of gently working it out of there. And then yeah, this nut here is probably, yeah, it was just stuck. So we'll set these aside. On the driver's side, we're going to be removing this brace piece right here. There's two nuts or two bolts we'll remove with a 15mm socket. And if we look through the opening here, we can see that there's a bolt inside there. And it looks like there's also one down here as well. Those are going to be a 10mm socket. We'll get those zipped out of there. And then this one is next. Kind of work it around like that to get it removed. We'll just shake the bolts out of there and we'll set this aside as well. All right, now that we've got our fascia out of the way here, we do have to make quite a few modifications to our vehicle here in order for this base plate to fit. So I've gone ahead and marked out some areas here that we're going to be trimming off. There's areas on the other side we're going to have to trim, and we do have some more trimming after that as well. So we're going to use our reciprocating saw here to remove this. If you didn't want to have to do so much modifications to your vehicle, you might want to consider a base plate from Roadmaster, because theirs will be a replacement of your bumper here, so there's quite a bit less modifications with that style. But we're going to go ahead and continue here and get this one installed, and we're just going to get this chopped right off of here. And the marks we made are pretty much flush with the frame. That's kind of our end goal here, is to be flush with the side of the frame. So it looks like we might need to take just a little bit more trimming off here just to get flush. You can take a file to it as well if you don't want to go back with the blade, if you just got a little bit to take out of there. Where again, that's our goal, is to just kind of make it smooth down with the side of the frame. And on the other side, the goal is the same. We want to make it flush down with the side of the frame, and we're going to cut along to the bottom of our bumper beam. We'll now want to remove the cooler if it's present on your vehicle. Some may not have it equipped. It is an optional item. If you do have it though, there's 2 bolts. You can see these the clamps right there. We're going to take out the bolt using a 10mm socket. And our cooler, we're just going to let it sit right there. And we'll also want to pop off the temperature sensor that's right here. So we're just going to get underneath of it, using a pair of needle nose there just to kind of pop it up out of there. We can just let it hang right there. And then I did mark the area here, because we have to trim this off. And we're just going to use a razor knife to cut this out. And actually, for this top little tab there, we'll take a pair of snips to just trim that off of there to get that out of the way. All right, we got that trimmed out of there now. All right, we got a little more trimming we still have to do here on our plastic panel. Each side, we need to trim off this excess that's going to be in the way of this base plate fitting. We're just going to use some snips to cut this out of here. And we'll cut the other side out just like that as well. So now we get the plastic trimmed out. I just went ahead and lifted the base plate up in here, and I put some clamps on it right here on each side to hold it up. When I went in, I did kind of tilt it down like this, sliding these ears under, and then rotated it back up to get them to slide up there on the side. I do recommend an extra set of hands to help you when putting this in here, especially for putting the clamps on. You can put it up here by yourself, but man, is it hard to get those clamps in place while you're holding the weight of this thing, because it just wants to drop right down. I also, before I lifted it up there, if we take a look on the side here, there's a red mark there. I measured down from the top of the frame here 1 1/8 of an inch. That's where the top of our base plate should line up if we've got it in the correct position. So I did the same thing on the other side, made that mark. We've double checked ourselves to make sure that our base plate is lining up with that mark on each side. And then I recommend too, just taking a step back from the front here and just making sure it's level across the front. If it all looks pretty good, it looks like we're pretty good here, we're ready to start drilling it out. We're going to use a 30-seconds drill bit to drill it out. We're going to start at our top hole here. Let's put a little bit of silicone spray in there to make it drill a little bit easier. And we're just going to drill straight on through. All right, so the next thing we're going to be doing after we got that hole drilled out is we need to feed our hardware in. Curt dropped the ball a bit here on this one though, because here's the bolt we need to feed in. You can see this bolt here does fit through the hole in our base plate here that we had drilled out. It does fit right on through there. You know, it fits through any of these holes. It's supposed to thread under this coiled wire so we can pull it through, but this is not the right size that comes in your kit. It could just been a mistake, but you can't even pass these through the base plate. So luckily here in the shop, we've got some fish wires laying around from other installs, but yeah, every single one of them was wrong in this kit. So we're just gonna set that aside. I do have one that we found here in the shop from previous installs that is gonna be the correct size. It's kind of unfortunate because now we're gonna have to do this whole install with one fish wire. Hope we don't damage it. It's nice when you've got enough for each bolt, because sometimes they don't want to unthread. But we're going to get this done. If you want to avoid this, I would recommend Roadmaster's base plate, because we don't even have to do all this drilling and all this nasty feeding through of your hardware. And I have a lot less quality issues with Roadmaster. Pretty much every part's always there the way it's supposed to be. But we're going to continue on with this guy and get this thing installed. So we're going to take our fish wire here. We're going to poke it through the opening. And then we need to angle it downward towards the square opening here on the bottom of the frame. And we're going to try and angle this to reach that. Sometimes it does, you have to kind of almost put some pre-bends in it to coerce it to go kind of the direction you want it to go. So we're going to do a little bit like that, because it does have to go kind of towards the rear of the vehicle. And you can see here kind of how we're having to force this through, why it's really nice to have more than just one of these to work with if something happens to the one we got here. So here it is. That worked, putting a couple of bends in it. We were able to get it to go towards this square opening here in the bottom and get it to pull out there. We'll take our spacer. We're going to slide our spacer over the coiled end. And this spacer may not be the exact correct size for this one. It's just one that I happened to find here in the shop that's going to be close enough for us to get this job completed. We'll then thread our bolt onto there. We're then just going to push that spacer up into the frame. We'll then push the bolt up into the frame. And then we can pull our coiled wire now to get it to pull out through our opening. And there we go, we got lucky there. We were able to get it through. So after we get that on there, this is really why you really want to have all those spacers too, because typically you just pull this off. We gotta gingerly try to unthread this now without damaging it, so we can use it on the remaining holes. We'll now take some red Loctite, put it on our bolt, and then thread one of the nuts on there. At this point now, we're gonna go over to the other side. We're gonna drill out that top hole so we can get a bolt on that side, so that way there's one on each side to hold our base plate up to ensure it can't move out of position in case, you know, vibrations and stuff from drilling causes our clamps to come loose. We're gonna have these bolts in here. So we'll do that side first. After this one, to have one on each side, and then we're just gonna drill out the remaining ones and get these installed the same way that we did here. So we're just gonna continue on getting that done, trying to use our single fish wire here to make all this happen. All right, so we've run into another issue here. Again, it's hardware related. The bolt here goes through our spacer, everything's great. But the problem we're having here is that when you go to feed these through the frame, you can't pull them through. Here's our coiled wire. I mean, it don't fit. And it's even worse once you thread a bolt on it, because once you thread a bolt on it like this, you've got the extra thickness of your threaded wire, and it can't collapse in on itself like it could if you don't have a bolt in there, because I was able to push this through the spacer without the bolt on it, but every time I try to feed it through the frame, I can barely get it to come through. And again, this is the only one we got. We don't want to damage this, and if you do pull this and your fish wire comes off and your bolt falls down into the frame, it can be very difficult to retrieve. So we're going to modify the hardware here just a smidge to make this all work. This is one size up from the drill bit that we were using, the 13/32. This one here is a 24/64. We're going to take that in here and just clean up all of the spacers. They're still going to maintain their square shape, so they'll still hold our carriage bolt and prevent it from spinning when we go to tighten it down. But if we recheck it here now, look at that, where we go. We'll be able to feed these into the frame without any problems. So we've got a weld nut behind the frame that has to be removed in order to tighten down your hardware for this rearmost bolt here. So you can't get to it, unfortunately. It would have been really cool if Curt would have just lowered that hole and used the weld nut in the frame. But we have to get that weld nut out of there now because our spacer is going to hit it. It's going to cock the bolt sideways. We're going to have a lot of unnecessary stress on that bolt if we leave it there. So it has to be changed. Your options are to remove your base plate completely and then drill out the weld nut after you've got it all set up like this, which that's a whole lot of extra time that we want to try to avoid. So the other option is to just cut out a section of the frame here on the bottom. We just took a reciprocating blade, we just kind of cut it down like that and then just bent it down. You can then put your a chisel up in here and just pop that thing off of there, and that's it. Looks like it popped off inside the frame there. We'll fish it out with a magnet. But that's all we needed to do. We just needed to get that weld nut off of there. If you look up in here, you can see that we've now removed that weld nut. After we get the 3 fish wired all installed and everything, we also drilled out the bottom hole there as well in the pinch weld. This is going to use different hardware though. It's going to have a hex head bolt with a conical tooth washer. We want to put the conical tooth washer on it with the teeth facing away from the head of the bolt so they dig into our hitch here. We're still going to put some Loctite on this bolt. And then this is just going to slide through our base plate, through the pinch weld where we drilled through, and then we're just going to put a nylon locking nut on the opposite side. There's kind of a little gusset there, so you got to reach around it a little bit. So it's usually easier if you hold the nut and thread the bolt into it because of that just kind of weird angle. We'll go ahead and get the other side started, and then we can go back and tighten these down. And now we can snug down all of our hardware. We're going to use a 9/16 socket, and you may need a wrench to hold the nut on the inside for these lower ones. And it may actually even be easier to use the socket on the nut. Let's see, yeah, because of the way the little gusset is on the bottom, it's actually going to be easier to put your socket on the nut, and then you can put your wrench on the bolt. And we're going to do the same thing over on the other side. We can then go back and torque our hardware to the specifications outlined in our instructions. Next, we're going to get our cooler reattached. In the instructions, it wants you to mount these little brackets here. And it tells you to mount them behind the bumper on top of where the old mounting location for it was, and then to mount the cooler up above your base plate. Well, that's not going to work because one, the hoses aren't long enough to reach up that high, so the cooler's never going to go up that high, and the base plate's in the way. So what we're going to do to make this happen is we're going to actually install it right here. So we're going to be putting it and have it down below in the front. And that way our hoses will reach and it'll be possible. We're going to remove the clips that's in here because the factory bolts, they got pretty big heads on the bolts, so they're going to hit your base plate. You're going to have a real hard time installing those. You do get hardware with your kit, so it's nice that they gave you that. So we're just going to pop these off here. I'll just pry down a little bit and then you can push outward to just push that thing off of there. And we're going to remove the one over on the other side also. Take the shorter bolts that come in your kit. I'm just going to drop this down through the hole where we just removed that clip from. We can then take our bracket. Might have to push that back up a little bit just to get it lined up. And drop that down through there. We're going to turn it sideways first just so we can get the nut installed on it. And we'll get that nut started on there. There we go. We're going to get the one on the other side started. Same way. We can then just bring our cooler back up here and we'll get that attached to our brackets here. So we're just going to drop our bolts down through those. These are the same pieces of hardware we use to attach the brackets to the vehicle. We'll use those to attach our cooler to our brackets. Now that we've got all these pieces loosely installed, we can go back and tighten them down. We'll now tighten down our hardware using an 11mm socket and wrench. We're going to do the upper bolts first. Next thing we'll have to do is attach our permanent safety cables. And the way these things are supposed to work is you're supposed to wrap it around your frame here and then attach it to the loop here on the bottom. You'll attach it to the loop because you see the ends here are closed. So you'll attach it to this loop using the quick link that it comes with. Although Curt didn't give us a big enough quick link. It doesn't open up far enough. And it's not just the powder coating, because I mean, I've got this open as far as it'll possibly go. I mean, you can see the nut is butting up against the curved portion, so it cannot unthread any further. And we're not even close. There's no way it's just powder coating. It's just straight not gonna work. So we're gonna have to go order some of these. We're gonna bring them over here, and we're gonna use some bigger ones that are going to attach to our base plate to get these attached. Okay, so we got us another clip here. This one here's from Roadmaster. You can see it's considerably bigger, way more robust than the one we got from Curt, and it's going to work with our base plate. The opening there is actually big enough for us to accomplish our goal. So we'll take our cable now, and we're just going to wrap this around the frame. And I'm putting my arm up here because I'm making sure there's no wires or hoses or anything like that. I don't want to pinch anything between this cable and the frame, so I'm going between the wiring there, making sure that we're staying with the frame. And just like that, we're just going to wrap it right around, and then we can take our quick link here, and I usually like to take it, if we can, and flip it over like that. It's just a little bit easier to get your quick link cable ends on there if you have it in this direction like this. And we'll just tighten this back down, and that'll attach our cable to this side. We'll just repeat this over on the other side now. We're now going to put our air box back into place. It goes up through this opening and it plugs into there. This is the end here. That will go up in there, so it's going to go kind of like this. But we don't want to put it up in there just yet. We need to put some spacers in place to clear our base plate. So we're going to put those spacers on the studs that used to attach, that our component was previously attached to. Grab these spacers here, and all they are is just washers. We're going to use 3 of these. They come in your kit. Slide 3 on one, slide 3 on the other, and then we can put our air box back into place now. And you just kind of got to rotate it, and it just rotates and falls right into place. Check your studs. Go, make sure it slides over each of those, and then we can reinstall the nuts after that. All right, and at this point now we've got our base plate fully installed. We've got all of our components hooked up that we need to. Everything's reinstalled behind the fascia. At this time, I highly recommend that you finish the rest of your flat toe setup and then get the fascia back into place. And I've already went ahead and did that here real quick. I went ahead and finished up the rest of the components the customer wanted. They didn't get a braking system on this one, but they did get diode wiring and a charge line kit. So I went ahead and installed those because you could see how much easier it is to route your wiring now than when your fascia is back on. It's going to be quite a bit more difficult. I also added this bracket here to the front because Curt didn't provide any location for you to mount your connector here at the front of the vehicle. So what we're doing here to get this attached, we're using 2 long brackets, and we just attached the long bracket, one right here on the bottom side of our base plate, and then we bolted the other long bracket to that long bracket so it'll extend out far enough. We did have to drill holes to match those up. We just used the hardware that came included with the long brackets to extend it out. So yeah, you gotta get a little creative on how you're gonna get your wiring mounted up with this Curt one here. If you go with the Blue Ox, that's gonna have accommodations on the base plate for your connectors, and Roadmaster also gives you accommodations. So if you go with the Curt here, you are gonna have to make your own little bracketry. So now that we've got that on though, we'll go ahead and get our fascia reinstalled. And to do that, we do have to do a little bit of trimming behind it. So let's head over to the fascia and we'll make the trimmings that we need necessary on it, and then we'll get it back into place. Before we reinstall our fascia, we do need to make some modifications to the foam that we've got here. We're going to trim out this section here. We're just going to use a razor knife. I mean, it's foam, so you can even rip it if you want, but we can make it a little cleaner if we score it with our razor knife. So we're just cutting down to there, and then we're going to cut down this way. And we're just going to rip that piece. We'll get the rest of it, so that way it's smooth all the way down. Peel that off of there. We'll also need to trim off the tab located right here. So we're just going to take our razor knife and we're going to trim this tab, as well as this tab. We'll then repeat that over on the other side. And now with the next set of hands, we're going to get our fascia back into place. If you did install diode wiring or anything like that, make sure you grab that wiring and just pull it through there a little bit so you can access it later. We're then just going to slide it into position. Double check our base plate here at the front. Looks like we need to come my way, Joe. Oh, no, we go your way.
I'm okay over here. Up here, according.
Oh, no, maybe it is my way, because we're way off centered.
Yeah, mine needs to go
Towards me?
towards the back. Yeah, right there.
Okay, there we go. And we're just going to be snapping these back into place. This is a very tight fascia, so just take your time and slowly work it into position. And if you get your fascia in place here, you can see where our components pass through. Then to make sure you install your bolt where it attaches your fascia to your fender here, and then also your fender liner attachments. And that completes our installation of Curt's base plate on our 2016 Chevrolet Equinox.